Hi and welcome everybody. We're in my wormery today and we're going to feed a few of my bins. On the menu today is mango. So while these were still frozen, I was able to get a good enough grip on them to be able to put a hacksaw to it. And I was able to hack these babies right in half. Because, you know, I think the inside of the seeds of the mango are very appealing to the worms. At least that's what I've noticed. Once they manage to get into the seed, they go nuts for what's inside. So I figured I'd try to expose it for them right off the get-go. Creating a little bit of a bedding material that we could put underneath this. Okay. Why don't we get started with the sister bins? We have two bins that we've been managing in an identical fashion. And I usually pull them off the shelf one at a time. But this time, why don't we get both of them out here so we can do a little compare and contrast. Okay. Now, almost 4 weeks now is horizontal migration to try to encourage the worms to come over to this side of the bin, and I think it's worked pretty good. But I also feel like there's a fair amount of material in the bins that needs to be eaten still. So what I'm going to do is what I think a lot of people have been suggesting is to kind of not only horizontally migrate in one direction near the end, but also, you know, kind of switch them back and have them migrate the other way. So that was going to be my game plan, was to sort of eliminate these feeding zones and, you know, clear away this marker indicating where that is, and then over here on this far side, closest to me, start up a new feeding zone. You could see clearly this bin is already kind of at its max capacity practically. So why don't we just take a quick little peek down in here to see how they're doing. I can still see some of the coffee from the previous feeding. I could see the worms down here. I don't really see many large chunks of food, but I do, like for example right here, see a large mass of worms. So they must just be plowing through the food I gave them. Here's just some stuff that we always seem to find in my bins, is large chunks of corn, taking forever to break down as usual. Oh, look at this, a mango seed. Right? Like I mentioned earlier, once they find a way in, they really get jazzed about it. You can see they're just going nuts about this mango seed, because they must have found a way in. So, you know, whatever food's over here on this end, I guess it'll kind of wind down, but now we're going to move the newest batch of food over to the opposite end. That'll require the worms to pass through all the material one more time and hopefully gobble up all the larger pieces. This will be my first try at sort of doing a back sweep of the horizontal migration process back to the other edge, the opposite edge. Okay, so a few chunks in here, but it's a pretty good sized pit. I just need to put a couple half mangoes down in here and a couple chunks of cardboard. If it might be time to move over into larger containers with these, but I'm just gonna set up these couple pieces of mango in here. Guess I'm gonna try to give them some good incentive. I'm putting 3 halves, 1.5 in here. I'll put 1.5 in here. That'll leave 2 and 2 for the other bins. That should be fine. That should be plenty. Give them a little bit of here's the old cardboard divider. couple chunks. And I'll just top it off with my traditional coffee. Okay, I'm going to assume that there's enough grit in the container that if they're just coming over, we'll be able to, any newborns would be able to find sufficient grit on their way over and not rely on it to be in this new feeding zone. Okay, so I'm going to go back to marking with the coffee filter since there's no other visual clue here. Okay, now we can get over to doing this one. Just see how the feeding zone on this one is progressing before we excavate the opposite side and set up the new feeding zone. Another mango seed. Still some food in here, so I'm sure they'll keep themselves occupied over here for a while longer. But once things start to run dry over on this end, they'll have some fresh food waiting for them on the other end. So I'll be curious to see how this two-directional horizontal migration works for me. I think technically it is the proper way to do it, sort of have them sweep back and forth. I've always just gone one direction. Okay. I think doing this is not only just good for the satisfying my curiosity and be giving me a chance to check in firsthand how things are going, but there is a fair amount of moisture in here, so I think the aeration probably helps a lot too, just to make sure things don't start to get really stinky and gooey over here. Very nice. Alright, so I'm going to take a lot of this drier stuff and just pile that right onto the top of that moist feeding zone. I'll dig up this zone over here and get it ready for feeding. It's interesting how you just find stuff in the bins, rubber bands, little pieces of foil, little pieces of plastic. Okay, so here again we'll just throw a little cardboard to go along with the fresh food. We'll have some good stuff to come over to on this side. Yum yum. Delicious mangoes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you look at it from the edge on, you could see. I mean, true, I'll end up dumping some of it in here to help bury the food, but yeah, it's really at capacity at this point. Just give them a little bit of this as well. Alrighty. And then try to knock off this little mountaintop. Okay. New feeding zone in the other sister bin. I'll just mark it like so. Alright, let's get these back on the shelf and get the next bin started. Now, here we fed down the middle. It's a fairly recent bin. I'm trying to remember if the game plan with this one was to switch to a horizontal feeding at some point soon. But since I don't recall that being the plan, I'm just going to stick to what I started here, which is continuing to feed down the middle. So let's prep things here for that purpose. What do we have here? I think last time I wrapped the food or laid it on top of a coffee filter. Yeah, here you go. I think I was trying to incent the worms to rip through the coffee filter. I was curious to see how they do. I don't see any holes in the coffee filter, so it seems like they're not doing such a good job. Maybe they're just sucking the juices through it. Down here, old corn cobs still working their way through. Very densely populated down there. Let's see what else we can find. Some more food scraps being worked on, also wrapped in coffee filter. Maybe not as many worms here unless I reach right down to the very bottom, where there's always many. A lot of little ones too when you go down that deep. Okay. This bin from the start, I knew it was going to be a very active bin. It was launched with a huge number of worms. I've been feeding it very generously every time. Things in different order every bin. Okay, I think these are going to be popular, alongside all the other popular food that they're nibbling away at right now. Add it to the hole. Yeah, this is a very, very active bin. Let's put the feeding zone cover here. Cover this guy up. I got some ideas for this bin as well for maybe a future time-lapse video. And the only thing that remains now is this oddball container, which I really just made it out of a shoebox, basically. I wonder if I could lift up the camera a little bit so it's easier to see what I'm doing on this one. I'm anticipating that it's going to soak through and that whatever action is happening inside the box will just drop down into the plastic bin underneath. So, just sort of a little experiment to see how long that takes, or see how long my patience runs waiting for something interesting to happen. Because I could tell right away, I mean, just the convenience factor of being in a larger bin is immediately noticeable. When you start trying to do stuff in a small bin like this, you really feel cramped for space. Maintaining a regular feeding schedule, just to have a good supply of constantly available food for them. So there should be enough room for us to lay in a couple halves of a mango. And I'm not so impressed with whatever it is that these pieces of cardboard were doing up on the surface, so I'm going to add them to the bedding. This piece, whatever, I'm going to use it as like what my coffee filter normally does, which is mark the feeding zone. And we'll tap out whatever remaining coffee we had. This is the first formal feeding for this bin. This is as good as it's going to get today. So we fed in the middle, put the marker down, and put it back on the shelf. So that's it for today as far as feedings are concerned. I need to hang tight just for one more minute. Okay, so I wanted to just take you over to give you a quick little peek of something I've only been teasing with. I've seen it from the perspective of the other side, looking through the curtain and not actually seeing what's happening. But this is the view from the other side, from peeking in from behind. So what you see off on the right over there is a GoPro camera set to take photographs at a particular interval, and inside the bin is something that's been in there now for 50 days. So I kind of feel bad for the worms that are populating that bin, because 50 days with only that whatever that is that they got back then. You could tell that whatever that was, it's more or less history at this point. If you touch it, it's like a paper thin, it's like just dust anymore. So there's really not much food material left in that. So the time lapse that's happening here should be done in a short while, and believe me, it's going to be good because I've seen all the sneak previews, and I just want to save all that for its official release once it's complete. But this is far enough along that I figured it's time to just reveal what's happening behind the curtain, give everyone a quick view of one of my secret projects. So that's it for today, everybody. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll tune in again next time. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And even think about subscribing to my channel. This way you'll get updates next time I post funny videos like this. All right, have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.